Greetings. My name is Brad Hessel. I'm chair of the Wake County Libertarian Party, and this is the March chair report. And don't have a lot to talk about in February. It was relatively quiet if you're not treasurer of over a dozen campaign committees, as I am, and I had to file reports for the first quarter. The first quarter in North Carolina ends in mid-February because we have a primary. Our primary was yesterday, and the North Carolina State Board of Elections tries to get reports out for all the candidates running in the primary before that, the one report right before that primary happens. So, anyway, that's all past us. And now, since the primary happened yesterday, we know what the lineup of candidates is going into November. And we're very excited. We have in Wake County, we have three North Carolina House candidates who are running 1v1 against a Democrat, as there's no Republican in those races. And overall, we expect to have about 12 or 13 candidates on the ballot in Wake County. And that includes folks that are running locally and folks that are running for U.S. Congress, which in two cases is more counties than just Wake. They're multi-county districts. And then, of course, we do have a statewide candidate running for U.S. Senate. And his name is Shannon Bray. Be familiar to folks that have been following libertarian politics for the last half a decade or so. Shannon has run several times for office, including two prior runs for U.S. Senate in 2020, I want to say. He ran against Tom Tillis and Sherry Beasley, and that was a very competitive race. And Shannon ended up getting an all-time record 172,000 votes for his candidacy, which was more than twice the number of votes that separated the two establishment party candidates. So it's quite possible that the Libertarian vote may have decided that election. Then in 2022, he ran again for U.S. Senate, and it was uh, Cunningham and Bud, if I'm not mistaken. You correct me if I'm wrong here, Shannon.
Yeah,
Um,
I think Cunningham was with Tillis,
was Cunningham was
and
Tillis? It could be.
yeah,
I may have it
Beasley.
backwards. Yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds right. In any event, that was an off-year election in 2022, not a presidential election. So he garnered only 51,000 votes, which is still a fair number in that election. And now he's coming back for a third dip. Shannon is a cybersecurity consultant. He can tell you a little bit more about that. And I guess, maybe you could start out by, in fact, telling us a little bit about your background and how it is that you came to be running for office as a libertarian.
Thanks, Brad. Well, thanks for having me, Brad. Yeah, I've ran a couple times, and the big question a lot of people ask me is why. Why do you do this if you don't think you can win, or why did you even do it to begin with? But when I started in 2016 or 28, maybe it was 2018, it was really more out of frustration because we'd already we'd already kind of seen the politics of Trump kind of influence a few things. The government has shut down multiple times. So each time it got shut down, it was longer, longer, and longer. I mean, there was trash in the streets of DC. And we had a congressman that had died on our East Coast, Walter Jones, and they had a special election, and I was off work. It was I was furloughed, is what they call it, to where you can't work, you're not going to get paid. So I tried to put my energy into something I thought would be meaningful. So I decided to go run for Congress in a district that wasn't even mine. And I had a great time. I got to run with another libertarian, and I kind of really got to understand him, his politics, the area. And so when the following election came along, I felt like um, I would do well, kind of this on the same issues at the federal level. And there wasn't a whole lot of libertarians, I think, that were really looking to go the federal stage because ideally, change begins locally with most of our practices. But at the same time, we need somebody to champion for us at the federal level, and um, it's fun. It's one of the few times that uh, you people actually care about what you think. So, this is where, you try to put some thought and ideas and not just kind of stay with the status quo of, picking a Republican topic or picking a Democratic topic. It's how do we fix our system with libertarian ideas and are they better? Because you don't hear fresh ideas much anymore. Andrew Yang had a bunch. But other than that, it's just all regurgitating the same stuff every election, and we're not getting anything moved forward. We're not really finding a whole lot of innovation, and I think politics is really kind of hindering us a bit.
Well, I think that one of the benefits of your experience that you've outlined there is that you are pretty well prepared. And this time around, Shannon has written a book, which is basically his platform. And it sounds kind of intimidating. It's like 70 pages long. It's not really, it's like fairly big print. And it's really well organized. And I've actually never seen a campaign document quite like this. What he's done is he goes through several issues. There's like a dozen or so issues that he talks about in some detail, and he has a format for each of these issues, which is he talks about what it is that he wants to do in with respect to that particular issue, taxes or immigration or whatever. And then he has a section in each of these issue areas, what's in it for me, where he talks about how it will benefit folks in North Carolina to do what it is he's proposing. And then he has a section called Social Connection, where he draws a couple of examples of people who would benefit or who are suffering because this isn't the way we're doing things, or would benefit if we did do them this way. And then he talks about the constitutional justification. That is to say, how is this, what he's proposing, congruent with the U.S. Constitution? Then he talks about what obstacles are in the way legally. That is to say, what laws are preventing us, if any, from doing what it is he wants to do. And then he has a section talking about what the criticisms of his idea would be, what the opposition would say, and then he rebuts those objections. So basically, this is really a very clever, I think, way of organizing and advocating for ideas. This book, we'll put a link in the comments on this video. It is available on Amazon.com, and Shannon may have some other suggestions for how you can get a hold of it. But in any event, I do recommend that you at least take a look at it online. It's pretty good stuff. So, Shannon, let's talk about some of the issues that are in the book. I guess we should start with taxes. Now, libertarians typically are not big fans of taxes, but you have some specific concrete ideas for moving forward. So, talk to us about those, please.
Yeah, ideally, the entire book is broken down into your money, your freedom, and then your future. And the most important thing in almost any election is the economy. We all care about our dollars and how far things are going. But we also have a lot of services and things that we don't necessarily want to pay for. So one of the things that is on the platform, and it's on everybody's other libertarians platforms as well, is cutting taxes. But the one thing that I've trying to turn my phone down, it's the iPhone. One of the ideas that I think that really will have a lot of merit is with the fair tax. And our current tax system now really punishes productivity and rewards, political influence. And we got millions of Americans who spend enormous amounts of money trying to navigate the tax code. And even the professionals sometimes have a hard time articulating what the tax codes are. And in a free society, I don't feel like we shouldn't be required to have somebody do our taxes so that we get money back. Um, so ideally, um, we're we can have a much simpler tax code that's easier to implement, that people can take care of their themselves instead of having to go hire people, and basically eliminate the IRS as a system. Um, because we shouldn't have to have lawyers and accountants in order to get our money back that we've overpaid.
So the fair tax, that's the proposal that Gary Johnson ran on in 2012. Is that what we're talking about here?
Yeah, I think so. I think that Gary Johnson really brought a lot to the table, and a tax system similar to that would I think be beneficial, at least to the point that we definitely have to simplify things to where everybody can understand it.
So
The way
as I
it
understand it, the fair tax essentially it eliminates the income tax totally. There is no income tax whatsoever. So that's what you said. The IRS goes away, and what replaces it is a essentially a sales tax that has a built-in protection for low-income folks in that there is a pre basically a payment made to folks below a certain income threshold that covers their basic expenses. That is to say, the tax on their basic expenses, so that it's a wash for those folks. And folks with higher incomes just pay the sales tax, and essentially it's a sales tax built in to whatever it is you buy that's new. I think it doesn't apply to used stuff, and it's designed to make to result in income to the government that is equivalent to what it is now. So it's not a libertarian let's get rid of taxes idea, but essentially, like you said, it's not taxing productivity, and essentially, the more money you make under an income tax, the more you pay. It kind of disincentivizes folks to be productive and to make money. This doesn't tax you for doing that. This taxes you for spending. And we do have an overconsumption problem in the United States to some extent. So this essentially would address that as well. It's taxing overconsumption rather than taxing productivity. Is that a fair summary?
it is.
Cool.
Yeah, the fair tax is operates proportionally. But it's also an important step for us because while, most libertarians would be, and they do, let's get rid of taxes, and I've said it myself, it's how do you get there from here, right? So a lot of the ideas are those steps. How do we get to a freer society? How do we get rid of the IRS? And I think something like the fair tax, working through the sales tax proportionally with people is a much better way than just coming out and saying, hey, let's get rid of taxes altogether, because, some people are going to, a lot of people push back on that, even if they don't want to pay their taxes. So I think baby steps are really what I try to outline, even though most of them are kind of big steps as well.
Yeah, I think the fair tax would be a fairly big step, but from a libertarian perspective, not so much because it's not really reducing taxes overall strategically, but it's certainly aligning things in a different way that would be significant. All right, so moving on to another topic, you have a proposal for improving the criminal justice system.
Yeah, I've gotten an inside look at the criminal justice system here in North Carolina, and the justice system should focus on protecting our rights and maximize instead of rather just maximizing punishment. A lot of times with the civil asset forfeitures or even in some of these divorce court situations, they're coming in and taking property and money from citizens without due process. So it's important for us to have a reform that will prioritize like fairness, accountability, and have proportional consequences. And I've spent on, you know, 2 years now on the wrong side of all of these laws that ultimately ended up, finding me not guilty and things like that. But at the same time, I still, even though I wasn't guilty, I lost a house. And this isn't just happening to me, right? This happens across the board in all sorts of situations. And it should just be, a free society. In a free society, the government should actually have to prove you guilty versus just assuming you're guilty, taking your stuff, and then trying to figure it out later.
Well, notoriously, the United States has more people in jail on a percentage basis than any other country in the world. Is that because Americans are misbehave more than other people?
It's a money grab, right? We all know that the cops hang out, at the end of the month for ticket revenue. And if if they weren't arresting new people and keeping the funnel processing, it wouldn't pay for itself. And that's why they have to do prisons the way they do them. And many times they're farming those out to private companies who are trying to make a profit. So it's not about consequences, it's about revenue. And our justice system should never be about revenue.
Okay. Another issue that you talk about is immigration. What's the solution there?
Well, immigration is kind of I mean, it's the foundation of pretty much our entire country, right? Because immigration helps spawn innovation and increases our economy. But at the same time, there are rules and laws out there that make it difficult for companies to hire immigrants from other countries and bringing them in. And the red tape and bureaucracy that are associated with that just make it almost impossible for people to get here legally. So then we're looking at then you just have ways of people trying to circumvent the system. Well, it'd be nice if we can simplify most of our immigration processes to where, you're still making sure that the riffraff stay out, but we have so many hardworking citizens or immigrants out there that could be successful citizens in our country if we just kind of simplify some of those processes.
Well, the current administration's policy on immigration, theoretically, they're only dealing with the riffraff, but of course, in practice, it's clearly not just criminals. I mean, just violent criminals who are being arrested and ultimately deported. And one of the things that I find ironic is that the crime rate among immigrants who are not citizens is actually significantly lower than the crime rate for Americans who are citizens. And so by throwing these people out, we're actually going to be raising our crime rate because the average is going to go up unless something else changes, but let's see, what else? You also have a recommendation or series of recommendations on the conservation front. You want to talk to us a little bit about that?
It's so we have a lot of issues in um, the conservation of our natural resources. We have companies who are just dumping whatever waste they want to. And they may have to pay some fines or something like that, but they're typically not relatively even close to the amount of money that has to then be spent by our government to go ahead and fix stuff if it even gets fixed. So a lot of times we have organizations and companies that were just polluting a lot of our resources and they're not held responsible. In fact, sometimes there are companies out there that may have government contracts and then they are completely immune to any of the regulations. And ideally, I think that people who harm the environment should be responsible for repairing it, and that we should they should be fined accordingly to kind of make the world a cleaner place.
So there's a resolution now that I think has been passed by the Senate and it's up to the House, or maybe vice versa. Maybe the House has passed and it's up to the Senate. I can't remember, but it's HJ Resolution 140, which deals with 225 acres that are under consideration for copper mining that are right next to the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness, which is a huge area along the border with Canada that was set aside in Minnesota for for basically for people to go and enjoy the wilderness by Teddy Roosevelt. This is going back, 150 years, well, 130 years, something like that. And it appears that setting up a copper mining project right next to this area would have some significant consequences, environmentally speaking, in terms of the fauna and flora that are now currently thriving there. There's a lot of toxic waste that comes off of copper mining, and the guy that wants to do it is not an American. I can't remember what South American country he's from, but apparently he's friends with one of Trump's either his son-in-law or one of his sons. I can't remember which specifically, and has been pushing for this to happen for quite a while. So it's close to happening. Would that be kind of an example of what you're talking about?
That's a perfect example of when, they're just not being held responsible to the same standards as now if a mom and pop store tried to do the same thing, they would ultimately be stopped. But, people are able to influence their immunity, I guess, to some of these laws and regulations.
So, do we need to adjust our corporate law to make it that corporations or maybe the individuals who own or control these corporations are more responsible, held more responsible for the actions of the corporation? Because to some extent, the corporate shell really protects people making these decisions from the consequences of when something goes wrong, right?
Right. Well, that's the problem. They want to treat companies as individuals half the time, and then the other half, you have like this blanket of protection over it. So, you've kind of got to, figure out or at least kind of navigate how you want that to work. But an organization should be responsible at the highest level at their board for pollutants and things like that are ultimately going into our environments.
Okay, one more issue that is in the book you talk about is Social Security.
Ah,
We have an issue with Social Security. In fact, here's an aside. I'm going to make an ad for Wake LP. We are actually going to be having a discussion about Social Security, an informal discussion at one of our meetups this month. I believe it's the 18th. Anyway, we'll put a link again in the comments. So if you're interested in this issue, you should, plan to come to that Wednesday night at Tobacco Road. Um, the trust fund, the so-called Social Security Trust Fund, is slated to run out of money in the sense that it will have not enough money to pay the outlays that are mandated. I think the date has been adjusted now to 2033, the earliest it's ever been projected to happen. And the way the law is currently structured, that will result in a 23% across the board cut to benefits to all folks that are currently getting Social Security. So anyway, obviously an issue. I mean, there there are certainly people, or there are certainly some folks who think that it's a Ponzi scheme and we should just get rid of it entirely. And then there are other folks who think we should just pay whatever we have to, raise taxes to be able to meet whatever the requirements are. And there's lots of opinion in between. So, what's your take on this situation?
Social Security is kind of one of those The government made promises to people, and ultimately they're just not able to withhold or to support it. It was designed in a different economic area at a time to where it may have made sense. But a lot of that no longer functions as a true retirement. So workers pay in for decades, and then as soon as they pay in, that money is being used for other things. So it's not being invested. It's not growing or helping, like your 401ks in your company. As those grow, you benefit, right? We don't have anything like that in our Social Security. And then at the very least, we should be able to allow people to opt in or invest in their own retirement, kind of like the 401ks, as opposed to using the Social Security structure. Because I think if it was structured more like a retirement plan, um, it would, it would be more sound than, a system that we're currently paying in, and we don't even know where the money goes, for a lot of that.
Well, I believe that the calculation is on average that your return on investment on your Social Security and the money you pay into Social Security works out to an average of about 2% on annual return, a compounded annual growth rate of 2%. If you put that money in the stock market, based on past history, of course, past history is no guarantee of future performance, but the stock market typically returns something on the order of 8% on a compounded annual growth rate basis over decades. So, in theory, what you're saying makes sense in that, somebody that could take that money and put it into a 401k that invested like in just an ETF for the whole entire stock market would do better. But on the other hand, there's also the argument that the one thing with Social Security is that because you're forced to put in money to that, um, you do it. Whereas, a lot of people might not have the discipline to take that money and invest it. So that from a social perspective, from an overall perspective, that could be an issue because you end up with folks that don't have sufficient savings, and then there's no Social Security guaranteed. So, I mean, what's your what's your solution for that?
Well, anytime that the government needs to make a decision for the people, I naturally oppose it. We should be able to opt out of Social Security. We should be able to opt out on many of our taxes if we're not, if we don't support the causes. So, as a free society, we need to be able to, um, choose where our money goes, and we don't necessarily do that. As you said, they just take it out. In fact, they do that with just about everything. And if somebody's taking something from you and you didn't give them permission, if I did it, they would call it theft. If the government does it, they call it taxes, or in this case, Social Security, because that money is, as we said, it's not being held there at all for you or for the person who just paid it. They're kind of looking, scrambling, trying to make everything work, and it does look like a Ponzi scheme in the end with the way that with the way that it actually works now.
It
But
is
it's just
misleading that you get a separate debit on your pay stub for Social Security. It looks like it's a separate thing from your regular taxes, and it's going someplace. The implication is that it's going someplace different, but of course, in reality, it's not. It's all going into the same pot. So
same pot.
that is misleading. I have to agree. All right. Well, Shannon, I appreciate you spending time with us walking through some of the aspects of your platform. There's lots more here. I mean, we have uh, privacy, school choice, healthcare, freedom of speech, clean energy, peace. That's a big one. And alternative currencies, competing currencies, abolishing the Fed, all kinds of stuff in here. Can you tell folks how they can get a hold of your book?
Yeah, Amazon's the best way. I think you can get the paperback version. There's three versions. The paperback version's $4.99. All the proceeds from that will come to help my election campaign. But there's also a free version. If you're on Kindle Unlimited, you can pick the book up for free and then even have it read to you if that's what you like. And then we also have a hardcover that I did just to have a hardcover. But all three are available on Amazon. Throughout the campaign, now that we know who the competition and everything is, I'll also be handing them out to volunteers and people that we see along the way.
And if folks want to learn more about your campaign, is there a website they can go to?
It sure is. Shannon Bray US. It's been completely rebranded. You'll also see more information about the book on there. And if there's any specific topics, most everything that's in the book is also on the website, plus some more policies and things like that. So if you're just kind of interested, dive through the website and ask questions, and I'll be happy to answer them.
Super. Well, thanks for spending the time with us again. And just for uh, folks to know, we are going to be doing a series of interviews with the folks running in Wake County for office in November. So you guys can look forward to that. And hopefully, if you're interested in Social Security, do show up at the meetup on the 18th of March. We also are planning another brunch. We had a very successful Sunday brunch at a popular Indian restaurant in Morrisville, and we're going to be doing that again. And in April, we're going to have a presentation from another one of our candidates, Ed George, who is going to be talking about basically applying a principled approach to making investments. Ed George is an acolyte of Warren Buffett and has done fairly well for himself. And so we'll be talking about, libertarians believe in principles. So Ed has, of course, the principles that you would use for investing are not necessarily exactly the same as you use for deciding on public policy, but it's the same kind of philosophical approach. So he'll be talking about that. Look for that in April. So anyway, hope you all have a great month and enjoy the spring, which by the next time we talk again, it'll be spring. And thanks for tuning in. Bye now.